So now that we have a fully functional player, all right, fully functional in the sense that we can steer them around a screen, let's go ahead and add enemies into the system so that we have something that we can collide with. And by the end of this next video, where we're going to be creating two classes, we'll have asteroids that'll come tumbling down that we can run into that can rather be destroyed by us or we can be destroyed by them. Still, no weapon systems, no firing, etc. That'll be coming up soon. So again, what we'll be doing in the next video is creating the enemy class as well as the asteroid class. So let's spend just a second and talk about them. So this is the first time where we're going to really be making use of our enemies list right here as we go in and we create an enemy. So when we instantiate an asteroid, that asteroid is an enemy. So we'll make sure that it automatically gets added into the enemies list so that later on when we have projectiles that are fired, those projectiles fired from a player are going to scan the enemy list for items that it can collide with. So obviously we need to exist in there. So when we instantiate an enemy, any sort of enemy, be it an asteroid, be it an enemy ship or whatever, then that particular item will always be added into the list because in the constructor for enemy, so on this particular class that is currently circled, we will simply add the enemy into that maintain static list of enemies. From there, we're going to set up our collide so that when, because if you recall, all the way back up here in game node, this is where our collision takes place. So if we collide with somebody that we can collide with, we can turn around an enemy and we can override that collision so that we can cause damage to start occurring, if you will. And the way we're going to go about doing this is simply a health exchange system. That is how we're going to determine the amount of damage that we'll need to do, and then we'll simply call upon that particular node's take damage and then give them the amount we've come up with. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Have an asteroid. He has a health of 25. We have a player's ship. Player's ship, let's say he's in perfect shape, has a health of 100. The player ship was going up the screen and the asteroid was coming down the screen, you can see where in the next few game ticks we're going to have a collision. When we have a collision that occurs, we're going to, inside the enemy class, do a simple exchange of values. So in other words, we're going to tell this guy to take damage. The damage amount that we're going to take is the amount of the guy we've just collided with. So we'll take 100, which means we'll definitely drop down below 0, which means this guy will explode. And then the same thing for the ship. The ship is going to take damage as well. It is going to take the damage amount that was the health of our asteroid. So after the collision, the asteroid's going to be gone because sending this over into take damage will kill off the asteroid because he goes below 0. But after take damage on our player will be left with 75. So once we set all of this up in enemy, so basically what we're doing is we're defining the characteristics of all enemies, unless later on we decide to, once again, in a particular enemy, override the collide code. But if we don't, all enemies will take on the nature of a simple exchange in healths, if you will. And from there, we will create our first class that will allow us to have an enemy visible on the screen. So we'll create our asteroid class of type enemy. We'll give them a little bit of health. I believe we're actually going to give them 50. And then we'll turn around and set up inside our game class some quick test asteroids so that we have something that we can shoot at and run into as well. Anything you want to add to this, Logan?
Just a real quick note on the damage exchange model that is presented between enemies and the incoming node, which will generally be between enemies and the player's ship. The reason that the damage is performed as an exchange is that result is actually similar to what would happen if you had simply had the enemy and the node cause each other 1 damage per game tick. What would happen in that case is we would establish a collision, each take 1 damage, and then progressively begin to move through each other, but always causing another point of damage. So if the asteroid had 25 health, that means after 25 game ticks, we would have caused enough damage to the asteroid to have destroyed it. But here's the interesting thing with that. One, you do kind of see the sprites move through each other as they do this, and two, as long as the sprites are colliding, they're going to be doing a per pixel collision check against each other. So that means to do the same end effect, that is, after 25 game ticks, we decided to destroy the asteroid. Well, that's 25 different times we had to get the asteroids and the ship's texture and compare them for per pixel collision. If, upon noticing that there's a collision, if we immediately just say, we can actually figure out what the result of that would have been. We can look at it and say, well, this asteroid has 25 health, the ship has 100 health, who's going to win? Instead of taking 25 game ticks to determine that, just use some very simple math, exchange damage, one of them explodes, and then we have one collision check instead of 25.
Exactly. Resulting in, well, you're not going to see sprites running over one another, and, yeah, bringing it all to a close nice and cleanly. So that's what we're going to be putting together in the next video. Again, it's really straightforward. There's no reason to get into code specifics and all that here. Everything that we're doing you've seen before. I just wanted you to have an understanding of creating an enemy. Enemy gets dumped into our enemies list, and how damage works with Collide. So with that, that's going to wrap up this video. In the next video, we will create some asteroids. Thanks a lot.